morning everyone, this is Alan J. Kaandig. My lesson today is about quadratic equation and I am going to use the personalized activities integrated with lecture method. This lesson includes the overview of quadratic equation, the different methods in solving quadratic equations, and application to its daily life. Before we start our lesson, let's have first a review. We have the first activity, which is the crossword puzzle. This activity will test your prior knowledge on multiplying polynomials. The direction of the activity: complete the crossword puzzle by indicating the products of the given. Pause this video for you to give time to solve. I believe you already through completing the crossword puzzle. Let me ask you something. How did you find the indicated product? Did you find any difficulties in finding the product? What pattern did you use? Now I am going to show you different pictures. Picture number 1, the boy is playing a ball. Picture number 2, it's a roller coaster. Picture number 3, a rainbow. And the last picture, the bridge. On the given pictures, what did you observe? Do you find any similarities among those pictures? Yes. All of them created a curved shape. When the boy is throwing a ball, the ball creates a curved shape. A roller coaster also creates a curved shape. A rainbow is a curve. And the bridge have a design of a curve. Now, based on the picture that I am given, it is related to what we are going to discuss today. Who among you could guess what is our topic today? That's right. We will be dealing with quadratic equations. But before we start our lesson, let's have first our objectives. The objectives of the lesson: at the end of the lesson, 90% of the students can identify the forms of quadratic equation, perform the process of converting the hidden quadratic equation to its standard form, and applying the procedure on solving quadratic equation using the different methods such as factoring, completing the square, and quadratic formula. Let's have now the key concept. While I am having my lecture, you are going to do your activity number 2, which is the note-taking. While I am having the lecture, you will be going to take down notes all the important details on about the topic. For instance, the definition, characteristics, and examples. A chart is used for you to take down notes the important details. Consider an example: x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0. So this is an example of a quadratic equation. To illustrate the example x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0, I am going to use the algebraic tiles. Consider this square whose side measures x unit. Then, the area of this is x squared units. And this tile, a rectangular tile, whose side measures 1 and x. The area for this is x units. And this small square tile measures 1 unit. So the area is 1 square units. consider the quadratic equation, x squared plus 3x, so we need to have 3 rectangular tiles to represent 3x. So we have now x squared plus 3x plus 2. So we need 2 small squares. So then, to illustrate x squared plus 3x plus 2, we have this tile, which is x squared plus 3x plus 2. What makes the equation quadratic? To define a quadratic equation, it is an equation that can be written in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c is equals to 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers, and a is not equal to 0. We use a, b, c here as a numerical coefficient, which means these are all real numbers, and a must not be equal to 0. What if a is equals to 0? What happened to the equation? Yes, it is a linear equation. So to have a quadratic equation, a must not be equal to 0. We use x, y, and z to represent the unknown variables. In this case, our unknown variable is x. Take note, an algebraic equation must be raised into 2. That makes it quadratic. Now let's take another example. So let's have 2x squared plus 5x plus 3 is equals to 0. This is a quadratic equation because one term is raised to 2, and we have the value of a, b, and c. What is the value of your a? 2. How about your b? 5. And c? We have 3. So this is an example of quadratic equation. How about this example? 2x squared minus x is equal to 0. This is a little more tricky because we don't have the value for c. So the value of your a is 2 and the value of your b is negative 1. How about your c? C is equal to 0. Since 0 is a real number, then we could say that this equation is a quadratic equation. How about this third example? (5x plus 2x minus 5). Is it a quadratic equation? Yes, it is not a quadratic equation because no terms raised to 2. To write the quadratic equation, the first term will be the term raised to 2. Then it follows with the degree 1 and the constant. Now we have quadratic equation which cannot be written in its standard form, and these are the hidden quadratic equation. We are going to convert it into standard form in order for us to determine if it is a quadratic or not. Let's take an example. Example number 1. X squared is equal to 2x plus 3. This example is not written on its standard form. How are we going to rewrite this equation into its standard form? Yes, we need to transfer 2x plus 3 to the other side. So we will have x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equals to 0. We subtract negative 2x and negative 3 on this side and on the other side to come up with a standard form x squared minus 2x minus 3 is equals to 0. So then, this is a quadratic equation. Let's have another example. This equation, 2 times the quantity of x squared minus 2x is equals to 3. Can you now determine if it is a quadratic or not? So let's try to convert it into its standard form. You need to distribute 2 to the quantity x squared minus 2x and transfer 3 to the other side to have its standard form. Now let's have the third example. Z times the quantity of z minus 1 is equals to 2. How are we going to convert this into its standard form? Yes, you're going to distribute z to z minus 1 and move 2 to the other side. So we have z squared minus z minus 2 is equals to 0. This is now its standard form. So we could say that the given is a quadratic equation. Now, you will have your activity number 3 and it is quadratic or not. This activity will test your ability to identify equation with if it is quadratic or not quadratic equation. The direction, you are going to group the given equations into 2. Column A consists of quadratic equation and column B consists of not quadratic equation. You can pause the video to give time for you to answer. I believe you already through answering the exercise or activity number 3. Now, you are going to check your answer based on the answer that I have. There are 6 quadratic equations and 4 not quadratic equations. Now, I will ask you, how did you come up that there are 6 quadratic equations on the given? Yes, you are going to convert the given into its standard form and test if it is in the form ax squared plus bx plus c is equals to 0. Now, you will have an activity number 4 and it is perfect hand. This activity will help you identify perfect square trinomial. On the activity, you are going to find perfect square trinomial and give its factors. An example is already given. So you have already your answer. Now my question is, how did you find perfect square trinomial? And how did you factor the given perfect square trinomial? Do you find any difficulties in factoring perfect square trinomial? You already know how to factor perfect square trinomial, but there are different strategies in order to factor a quadratic equation. But before that, we will have first activity number 5, and that is my initial ideas. This will measure your prior knowledge on factoring other than the perfect square trinomial. The direction. You are going to factor the given quadratic equation on the second column and write your answer on the initial ideas column. After finishing the activity, you are going to rate yourself from 1 to 5. 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest. And you can have your reflective comments on how did you come up with your initial ideas. Just keep your initial ideas. I am going to have a lecture on solving quadratic equation using factoring method. We are going to consider our example a while ago. We have x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0. I am going to illustrate this using the algebraic tiles. Since we have x squared, so we have our blue tile to represent x squared. Plus, so we have 3x. We have 3x plus 2 small tile. So we have now x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0. So this is how are we going to use or solve quadratic equation using factoring. We need to form a square. We need to combine all the tiles in order for us to create a square or a rectangle. To factor out x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0 using the algebraic tiles, I am going to create a rectangle based on the given algebraic tiles. So we have x squared and we have 3x. So I am going to create a rectangle using the tiles. So I place 2 rectangular tile here. Okay, so these are all algebraic tiles when we represent x squared plus 3x plus 2. In this case, this side is x, right? And this is 1 unit and another 1 unit. So we are going to add 2. We have plus 2. Now, on this side, we have also x. And we have, since we only have 1 unit, so we have plus 1. Now, how are you going to factor x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0 given this concept? Since it is the product of 2 sides of a rectangle, we could write x plus 2 times x plus 1. So then, x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equal to the product of x plus 2 and x plus 1. These two now are the factors of the given quadratic equation. Since we already illustrate factoring quadratic equation, now let's have the steps on factoring quadratic equation. Considering the example x squared plus 3x plus 2 is equals to 0, the first step that you're going to do in factoring the quadratic equation is to find the factors of the first term and the last term. In this case, the factor of the first term are x times x. Now, to find for the factor of the third term, you are going to consider that your factors will be the sum of the middle term. Now, what are the factors of 2 that if you are going to add the two factors, it will give you an answer of 3? Yes, we have 2 and 1. So you can write plus 2 plus 1. So now, the factor of x squared plus 3x plus 2 is x plus 2 and x plus 1. So we are going to equate this to 0. Since you have now the idea on how to factor a quadratic equation, we will have our activity number 6, which is follow my lead. This activity will test your understanding on how you're going to factor a quadratic equation. The direction. From the starting line, you need to pass through the finishing line. While in your way, there are problems that you need to resolve. Pause the video for you to answer. Now you are in the finish line. I will ask you, how did you resolve the problems that you have encountered? How did you factor the given quadratic equation? Did you find any difficulties in finding the factors of quadratic equation? Since you solved already the problems you have encountered in the activity, we will now have our activity number 7, which is the final ideas. This will assess your understanding on performing factoring in solving quadratic equation. Direction. We're going to factor the given quadratic equation on the second column and write your answer on the third column on final ideas. After solving the problem, you're going to rate yourself from 1 to 5. 1 is the lowest and 5 is the highest. And you have your reflective comments. Write there the difficulties that you have encountered in solving quadratic equation using the factoring method. Now, let's have solving quadratic equation using the completing the square method. Consider the quadratic equation x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equals to 0. We will be solving this kind of quadratic equation using the completing the square method. What we're going to do is just follow the methods. To solve this quadratic equation, first we need to transfer on the other side the negative 3 by adding 3. So we have x squared plus 2x is equal to 3. Did you remember that in a quadratic equation, we have the so-called numerical coefficients a, b, and c. In this case, our a is equal to 1, our b is equal to 2, and our c is equal to 3. The next step in completing the square, we need to complete this one as perfect square trinomial. What possible number that we are going to add in order for this expression be perfect square trinomial? You have to remember that you have to add b squared all over 4a. You add b squared all over 4a in both sides of the equation in order for us to do the completing the square method. Now, what's the value of our b? 2. How about our a? It's 1. What we are going to do is just simply substitute the value of our a and b. So we have 2 squared divided by 4 times 1. So we have 4 over 4 simplified as 1. So we need to add 1 on this side and on the other side of the equation. So we will have plus 1 plus 1. The next step, of course, we need to simplify by squaring the binomial. To square a binomial, we have x plus 1 squared is equal to 4. Since we are solving quadratic equation, we need to find the value of x. To find the value of x, we are going to square both sides of the equation. So we have the square root of the quantity x plus 1 squared is equal to the square root of 4. So we have cancel out. We have x plus 1 is equal to positive or negative 2. To find for x, so we will have x is equal to, let's take first the positive 2. 2 minus 1 is equal to 1. And next, we are going to find value of x taking negative 2. So we have negative 2 minus 1 is equals to negative 3. So we have two values for x, 1 and negative 3. That's completing the square method. Again, to solve the quadratic equation using completing the square method, we will take this example, x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equals to 0. What we do first, transfer negative 3 to the other side of the equation by adding 3. So we have x squared plus 2x is equals to 3. Now, we find for the value that we need to add to make this side of the equation perfect square trinomial by using b squared is equals to 4a. Substituting the value of b and a, we come up with 1. So we add both sides by 1. So we have x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equals to 3 plus 1. Now, to simplify, we have x plus 1, x squared plus 2x plus 1 is equal to 4. Now, this is a perfect square trinomial. We are going to find the square of binomial. We have the quantity x plus 1 raised to 2 is equal to 4. Extracting the square root, we have the square root of x plus 1 is equal to the square root of 4 is equal to x plus 1 equals to positive and negative 2. To get the value of x, we take first the positive 2. So we have x is equals to 2 minus 1 is equals to 1. And now, we take the negative 2 value. We have x is equals to negative 2 minus 1 is equal to negative 3. Now, the values of x are 1 and negative 3. That completes the completing the square method. Since you already know the procedure in solving quadratic equation using completing the square method, we will have now the activity number 8, the step-by-step procedure. In this activity, you will develop your critical thinking by giving procedures in solving quadratic equation using completing the square method. Directions. In the chart given, write the step-by-step procedure of solving quadratic equation using completing the square method. Pause the video for you to answer. I believe you already know solving quadratic equation using the completing the square method. Now, let's proceed in solving quadratic equation using quadratic formula. Consider an example of quadratic equation x squared is equals to 3x minus 1 solving this kind of quadratic equation using quadratic formula, we need first to convert the given expression into its standard form in order for us to determine the values of a, b, and c. In this case, we have to transfer 3x minus 1 to the other side of the equation in order to attain its standard form. So we have x squared minus 3x plus 1 is equal to 0. Now we can identify the values of a, b, and c. In this case, our a is 1, our b is negative 3, and c is equivalent to 1. Now, what is the quadratic formula? Quadratic formula is equal to negative b plus and minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. We will be using this formula in order for us to solve the quadratic equation. Just substitute the value of a, b, and c in the given quadratic formula and simplify the problem. So we have negative, substitute the value of our b, which is negative 3, plus and minus the square root of, what is the value of our b? It's negative 3 squared minus 4 times, what's the value of our a? 1, and our c is 1, all over 2 times 1. Then, we have to simplify. After substituting it, we need to simplify the expression. So, we will come up with 3 plus and minus the square root of negative 3 squared is 9 minus 4 times 1 times 1 is 4. Then, we have the square root of 5 all over. Now, since we have two values of x, we have to take first positive. So we have x is equal to 3 plus the square root of 5 over 2. That's the first value. The second value of x, we take the negative sign. We have 3 minus the square root of 5 over 2. Now, we already solved the quadratic equation with the values of x, 3 plus square root of 5 over 2, and 3 minus square root of 5 over 2. Now, I will let you solve the two remaining problems using the quadratic formula. We have the second quadratic equation. We have the second quadratic equation, 2 times the quantity of w squared minus 2w is equals to 1, and z times the quantity of z minus 1 is equal to 3. Pause the video for you to answer. Since you already have the idea on how to solve quadratic equation using quadratic formula, let's have activity number 9. In this activity, you are going to assess yourself on what have you learned in the previous lesson. In the chart, there are 3 things I found out, 2 interesting things, and 1 question I still have. You are going to identify 3 things that you have found out, 2 interesting things, and 1 question that you have. Now, we already identified 3 methods in solving quadratic equations, and these are factoring, completing the square, and quadratic formula. In this case, we are going to know what is the root of quadratic equation. Since terms are raised into 2, there will be 2 roots in a quadratic equation. These roots are the values of x, the unknown variable in the quadratic equation. Activity number 10, message from the teacher. This activity will give you an idea on how roots associated with quadratic equation. Directions. You will match A, which are the quadratic equation, to match B, which are the roots of the quadratic equations, and decode the secret message of the teacher. Pause the video for you to answer. Now, let's reveal the message from the teacher. And what is the message of the teacher? Yes, keep it up. For your assignment, you will have your activity number 11, the tic-tac-toe. This activity will let you solve quadratic equation using different methods together with your partner. Directions. Find the partner and select 3 problems in a row to form a tic-tac-toe. The first person who could create a row diagonally, horizontally, or vertically will be the winner. Write your answer on the box provided for you. Enjoy!